Throughout the vast and intricate story of human civilization, certain families have risen to prominence, their influence spreading like the roots of a great banyan tree, drawing sustenance from the land and in turn, shaping the very landscape around them. These are the great dynasties, lineages of rulers whose names have become synonymous with entire epochs of history. From the windswept steppes of Asia to the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean, these powerful families have, for generations, held the reins of power, their decisions echoing down through the centuries, determining the fate of millions and charting the course of nations. Their story is not merely one of kings and queens, but a saga of ambition, innovation, conflict, and survival. The legacy of these dynasties is woven into the very fabric of our modern world, a complex and enduring inheritance. It can be seen in the languages we speak, the laws that govern us, and the borders that define our countries. It resides in the magnificent architectural wonders they constructed, from soaring palaces to formidable fortresses, which still stand today as silent testaments to their power and vision. Their patronage of the arts gave rise to some of humanity's most sublime creations, while their political machinations and military campaigns redrew the map of the world time and time again. To understand these dynasties is to understand the powerful currents that have shaped human history. Join me now, as we embark on a journey across continents and through millennia, to explore the habitats of these remarkable ruling families. We will witness their rise from often humble beginnings, observe the strategies they employed to maintain their dominance, and uncover the extraordinary impact they had on culture, politics, and society. We shall look at 9 of the most influential dynasties that have ever existed, each a unique species in the ecosystem of power, each leaving an indelible mark on the planet and on the continuing story of humankind. From the icy expanse of Russia to the fertile banks of the Nile, their stories await. In the vast, often unforgiving wilderness of Russia, a dynasty emerged that would come to define this immense nation for over 300 years. The Romanovs. Their reign began in 1613, a time of turmoil, and under their rule, the Grand Duchy of Moscow would transform into the colossal Russian Empire, a territory stretching across 11 time zones. Like a hardy species adapting to a harsh climate, they expanded their domain relentlessly, pushing east across Siberia to the Pacific, and west, into the heart of Europe. Figures such as Peter the Great did not merely rule, they physically and culturally reshaped their environment, wrenching Russia towards the west, building a new capital on a swamp, and forging a modern army and navy from the raw materials of a medieval state. Their influence, however, was a force of immense pressure, both creative and destructive. The opulence of their court was legendary, a world of unimaginable wealth, fabulous jewels, and grand palaces, standing in stark, brutal contrast to the lives of the serfs who toiled on the land. This great divide, a deep chasm in the social landscape, would eventually lead to seismic tremors. The dynasty that had overseen the works of Tolstoy and Tchaikovsky, and had defeated Napoleon's Grande Armée, would ultimately be consumed by the very forces it had struggled to control. The winds of revolution in 1917 brought their story to a sudden, violent end, but their legacy, a complex tapestry of territorial expansion, cultural flowering, and social upheaval, continues to haunt and shape the Russian identity to this day. From the northern frontier, a new power descended upon the ancient heartland of China. They were the Manchus, and the dynasty they established, the Qing, would be the last to rule the Celestial Empire. Taking control in 1644, they inherited a civilization of immense sophistication and antiquity. Like a new predator entering a long-established ecosystem, they had to adapt, adopting Chinese customs and systems of governance to secure their rule over a population that vastly outnumbered them. For a time, their reign was one of remarkable stability and prosperity. Under emperors like Kangxi and Qianlong, the empire reached its greatest territorial extent, encompassing Tibet, Mongolia, and Xinjiang, creating the geographical blueprint for the China we know today. This period of strength, however, eventually gave way to a slow, inexorable decline. The Qing rulers, once so adaptive, became increasingly isolated, struggling to respond to new pressures from a world that was rapidly changing around them. The arrival of Western powers, with their advanced technology and insatiable appetite for trade, created a challenge the dynasty could not overcome. A series of humiliating defeats in the Opium Wars and internal rebellions, like the devastating Taiping Rebellion, fatally weakened the imperial structure. The Qing dynasty, which had presided over a vast and powerful empire, finally collapsed in 1912, leaving behind a legacy of both cultural consolidation and the painful memory of a century of humiliation that profoundly influences China's worldview even now. At the crossroads of the world, where Europe, Asia, and Africa meet, a small Turkish tribe began a truly astonishing expansion. For over 600 years, the House of Osman, the Ottomans, would preside over one of the largest and longest-lasting empires in history. Their conquest of Constantinople in 1453 was a pivotal moment, sending shockwaves across Christendom and marking their arrival as a dominant global power. From this new capital, Istanbul, their influence radiated outwards. Their domain was a complex mosaic of peoples, religions, and cultures, stretching from the gates of Vienna in the north to the Persian Gulf in the east, and along the entire coast of North Africa to the south. The Ottoman sultans, such as Suleiman the Magnificent, were not just conquerors, they were patrons of art, architecture, and science. The skyline of Istanbul, dominated by the elegant minarets of mosques designed by the great architect Mimar Sinan, is a testament to their cultural zenith. They controlled the vital trade routes between East and West, and their administration for a time was a model of bureaucratic efficiency. Yet, like all great empires, it faced the relentless pressures of time. The rise of new European sea powers bypassed their control of trade, and internal conflicts, coupled with a failure to modernize, led to a long and slow decline. The sick man of Europe, as it came to be known, finally dissolved in the aftermath of the First World War, but its immense cultural and political legacy continues to shape the modern Middle East and the Balkans. In the heart of Europe, one family mastered the art of political survival and expansion not primarily through war, but through marriage. The Habsburgs, their motto, "Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry," perfectly encapsulates their strategy. Through a web of astute and strategic dynastic marriages, this once minor noble house from Switzerland grew to dominate the continent. At their height, their territories were so vast that Emperor Charles V could claim to rule an empire on which the sun never set, encompassing Spain and its American colonies, the Netherlands, parts of Italy, and the Holy Roman Empire itself. They were the great defenders of Catholicism, their power a bulwark against both the Protestant Reformation and Ottoman expansion. For centuries, their influence was the central fact of European politics. The twin branches of the family, in Spain and Austria, acted as the twin pillars of a vast political edifice. They were patrons of magnificent art, with painters like Velázquez and Titian flourishing under their sponsorship, and their capital, Vienna, became a world center for music and culture. However, their vast multi-ethnic empire was a difficult creature to control. The rising tide of nationalism in the 19th century began to pull at the seams of their domain, with Hungarians, Czechs, and others all clamoring for self-determination. The final, fatal blow came with the First World War, a conflict that shattered their empire into a collection of new nation-states, forever changing the map of Central Europe. After nearly a century of foreign rule under the Mongol Yuan dynasty, China witnessed a powerful resurgence of native power. This was the Ming dynasty, whose name means brilliant. Founded by a peasant rebel leader, Zhu Yuanzhang, the Ming represented a restoration of Han Chinese rule and a renewed flowering of traditional culture. They sought to create a society of stability and order, rebuilding the infrastructure that had been neglected. The Great Wall, as we see it today, is largely a product of Ming construction, a monumental effort to secure their northern frontier against the ever-present threat of nomadic horsemen from the steppes. It stands as a powerful symbol of their determination to protect their civilization. The Ming era was a time of extraordinary artistic and technological achievement. It is renowned for its exquisite porcelain, with its distinctive blue and white patterns, which became a prize commodity across the globe. The monumental Forbidden City in Beijing, the Imperial Palace for centuries, was built during their reign, a masterpiece of architectural harmony and imperial grandeur. Perhaps most remarkably, in the early 15th century, the Ming sponsored the epic naval expeditions of Admiral Zheng He. His enormous treasure fleet sailed as far as the coast of Africa, decades before the European voyages of discovery, showcasing China's immense power and technological prowess. And yet, this outward-looking spirit did not last. The dynasty eventually turned inward, a decision that would have profound consequences for China's place in the world. In the Kingdom of France, a dynasty rose that would come to epitomize the concept of absolute monarchy: the House of Bourbon. Their reign is personified by one of its most famous members, Louis XIV, the Sun King. He moved the court to the magnificent Palace of Versailles, a dazzling theater of power designed to awe and control the French nobility. Here, the king was the center of the universe, around whom all life revolved. The Bourbon king centralized power, creating a powerful modern state and making French culture, its language, art, fashion, and philosophy, the standard for elegance and sophistication throughout the European world. Their influence extended beyond France, as a branch of the family also came to rule Spain, shaping the destiny of two of Europe's great powers. Yet the very source of their strength, this system of absolute power and immense privilege, also contained the seeds of its own destruction. The glittering world of Versailles was financed by the heavy taxation of the common people, creating deep social and economic divisions. The ideas of the Enlightenment, championed by French thinkers, began to question the very basis of monarchy and divine right. This potent combination of inequality and new ideas eventually exploded into the French Revolution, one of the most violent and transformative events in history. Although the dynasty was briefly restored, the age of absolutism was over. The Bourbons' legacy is therefore a dual one. They represent both the zenith of monarchical power and the catalyst for the revolutionary movements that would define the modern era. A new power, descended from the great Mongol conquerors Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, swept down from the mountains of Central Asia into the plains of India. They were the Mughals, and the empire they built was, honestly, one of astounding wealth, military might, and artistic brilliance. Beginning with Babur in the early 16th century, the Mughal emperors united a vast and diverse subcontinent that had rarely been brought under a single authority. Rulers like Akbar the Great were truly remarkable for their governance, promoting religious tolerance and creating a syncretic culture that blended Persian, Turkic, and native Indian elements, a fusion that can still be seen and felt across the region today. The wealth of the Mughal court was the stuff of legend throughout the world, funded by a productive agricultural economy and a flourishing trade in spices, textiles, and gems. This immense prosperity fueled an unparalleled golden age of architecture. The most iconic creation of this era, and perhaps of all time, is the Taj Mahal. Built by the Emperor Shah Jahan as a mausoleum for his beloved wife, it is not merely a building but a perfect expression of love, rendered in white marble. However, later rulers abandoned the policies of tolerance, and the empire began to fracture under internal rebellion and the growing influence of European trading companies, particularly the British. The great Mughal dynasty slowly faded, its power eclipsed, but its legacy is immortalized in the magnificent art and architecture that defines the landscape of the Indian subcontinent. In the island nation of Japan, centuries of brutal civil war between rival feudal lords, the daimyo, had left the landscape scarred and the population weary. Out of this chaos, one clan emerged victorious, finally imposing a lasting peace. This was the Tokugawa clan. And the system of rule they established, the Tokugawa shogunate, would govern Japan for over 250 years. Led by the shogun, who wielded true military and political power from his capital in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, the emperor in Kyoto was revered as a divine figurehead but held little actual authority. The Tokugawa shogun skillfully controlled the daimyo, forcing them to spend alternate years in the capital, a clever strategy to drain their wealth and prevent rebellion. The most defining policy of the Tokugawa was sakoku, the so-called closed country policy. Fearing foreign influence and the spread of Christianity, they expelled nearly all foreigners and forbade Japanese from leaving, effectively isolating their island habitat from the rest of the world. This period of isolation was not one of stagnation, however. It was a time of prolonged peace that allowed a unique and vibrant urban culture to flourish. This was the world of the samurai, of elaborate kabuki theater, woodblock prints, and the haiku poetry of Basho. But the outside world could not be kept at bay forever. The arrival of American Commodore Perry's black ships in 1853 forced Japan to open its doors, shattering the shogunate's authority and triggering the rapid modernization of the Meiji Restoration, ending this long and singular chapter of Japanese history. When the great conqueror Alexander the Great died, his vast empire fractured, divided amongst his ambitious generals. One of them, Ptolemy I Soter, claimed the richest prize of all, the ancient land of Egypt. Thus began the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Macedonian Greek family who would rule as pharaohs for nearly 3 centuries. They established their magnificent capital at Alexandria, a new city on the Mediterranean coast that quickly became the intellectual and cultural center of the entire Hellenistic world. It was a fascinating blend of cultures. The Ptolemies presented themselves to their Egyptian subjects as traditional pharaohs, their names written in hieroglyphs on temple walls, while to the Greek world, they were patrons of Greek learning and culture. The heart of their intellectual empire was the legendary Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from far and wide. It was here that the Earth's circumference was first calculated with remarkable accuracy, and where the foundations of geometry were laid down. The dynasty, however, was plagued by the kind of family strife common to many apex predators, with sibling rivalries and internal plots weakening it from within. Its final ruler would be its most famous Cleopatra VII. A brilliant and charismatic leader, she navigated the treacherous politics of a rising Rome, but her ultimate defeat and death marked the end of her dynasty and the end of an independent Egypt, which was absorbed into the Roman Empire, closing the final chapter on the Age of the Pharaohs. The stories of these great dynasties, from the Romanovs to the Ptolemies, are more than just chronicles of the past. They are the geological strata of our shared human history, each layer contributing to the world we inhabit today. We have seen how their ambition forged vast empires, how their patronage cultivated timeless art, and how their conflicts redrew the very maps of continents. They were the architects of nations, the authors of laws, and the arbiters of culture. Their decisions, made centuries or even millennia ago in opulent palaces and fortified castles, continue to echo in our modern societies, influencing our politics, our borders, and our very identities in ways we may not always recognize. The rise and fall of these powerful families serves as a profound lesson in the nature of power itself. It is a reminder that no dominion, no matter how vast or seemingly secure, is permanent. Like the greatest organisms in the natural world, dynasties must adapt to their changing environment or face extinction. They are vulnerable to internal strife, to the pressures of external rivals, and to the slow, inexorable tides of social and technological change. The magnificent structures they left behind are not just monuments to their glory, but also tombs that mark their eventual decline, a testament to the perpetual cycle of growth, dominance, and decay that governs all life, from the simplest cell to the most complex of human empires. The influence of these 9 dynasties is immense, but they are only part of a much larger and more intricate story of human power. Their legacies are intertwined, their histories often colliding, creating the complex and fascinating world we live in. But now, I turn the question to you. As you reflect on these epic sagas of ambition, culture, and conquest, which of these great families do you believe left the most significant and lasting mark on the course of world history? Which dynasty's influence do you see as the most pervasive today? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below, and let us continue the exploration together.